Seattle, October 2023. A 911 call reports something massive stumbling through Pike Place Market at dawn. When officers arrive, they find no perpetrator, only a trail of blood leading to an emergency room where a surgeon discovers the impossible. A patient whose DNA rewrites everything we thought we knew about human evolution. What the police couldn't explain would force one woman to choose between scientific glory and the survival of a people who were never supposed to be found. Dr. Maya Reeves had been a trauma surgeon at Harborview Medical Center for 11 years, and she'd seen nearly everything the Pacific Northwest could throw at a human body. Logging accidents, hypothermia cases pulled from the sound, climbers with compound fractures. Her hands had sutured and stabilized them all, but when her pager shrieked at 5:47 a.m. on October 14, 2023, with the code Alpha Unknown, she knew immediately that her entire understanding of anatomy was about to be challenged. She found the ER in controlled chaos. Two uniformed Seattle PD officers stood outside Trauma Bay 3, their expressions somewhere between bewildered and horrified. The senior officer, a graying veteran named Kowalski, held up a hand as Maya approached. "Doc, I need you to understand something before you go in there," he said, his voice low and tight. "We've been on the force a combined 40 years. We've transported every kind of person you can imagine. What's in that room," he paused, choosing his words with visible effort, "isn't in any of our training manuals." "Is the patient stable?" Maya asked, already moving past him. Clinical priorities overrode mystery. "Define stable," the younger officer muttered. Inside, the trauma team had assembled. 2 nurses, a respiratory therapist, and Dr. James Chen, the chief resident, who looked up at Maya with obvious relief. The patient lay on the table, partially covered by trauma blankets. But even from the doorway, Maya could see the scale was wrong. The body was too large, the proportions subtly off, in ways that made her visual cortex stumble. "Vitals?" she asked, approaching the table. "BP 180/95, elevated but stable," Chen reported. "Heart rate 52, bradycardic but strong, temperature 97.1. The problem is..." He pulled back the blanket from the patient's arm, and Maya's breath caught. The arm was human in basic architecture, radius, ulna, carpals, phalanges, but scaled up by at least 40%. The muscle density was extraordinary, the deltoid alone the size of a small ham. Dark auburn hair, coarse and thick, covered the forearm in a pattern more reminiscent of a primate than a human. But it was the hand that made Maya's medical certainty crack open. 5 fingers, opposable thumb, nails rather than claws, and a palm with dermatoglyphics, fingerprints arranged in complex whirls and loops that spoke of fine motor control. "Someone tell me what I'm looking at," Maya said quietly. "We were hoping you could tell us," Chen replied. "SPD found him, her, it collapsed in an alley behind Pike Place Market about 90 minutes ago. Severe laceration to the left thigh, probably from broken glass, based on the debris we pulled out. Lost a significant amount of blood. The EMTs almost refused transport until dispatch threatened disciplinary action." Maya moved to the head of the table. The face was covered by an oxygen mask, fogged with steady breathing. She nodded to the respiratory therapist. "Let me see." When the mask came away, Maya felt the world tilt slightly on its axis. The face was heavy-browed, prognathous, with a broad, flat nose and a receding chin that echoed ancient hominid fossils she'd seen in anthropology texts during medical school. But the eyes, when they fluttered open briefly, were unmistakably aware. Deep brown, with visible sclera, they tracked to her face with an expression that held fear, intelligence, and something else. A profound weariness, as if this individual had been running for a very long time. "Jesus Christ," whispered one of the nurses. "Professional conduct," Maya snapped, though her own hands were trembling slightly as she lifted the stethoscope to the patient's chest. The heart sounds were strong, quadruple rhythm normal, but the lung capacity was immense. She counted 30 seconds between breaths. "We need to page," Chen began. "No," Maya interrupted sharply. "Not yet. First, we stabilize and assess. That laceration needs surgical repair before infection sets in. Then we run a quiet tox screen, CBC, and metabolic panel. Nothing gets sent to the main lab until I've reviewed it personally. Dr. Reeves, with all respect, this is way above our... This is a patient, Maya said firmly, meeting Chen's eyes. A patient who came to us for help and is currently bleeding, scared, and vulnerable. We treat first. We ask questions later. Are we clear? The team nodded, though she could see the uncertainty in their faces. As they prepped the surgical suite, Maya pulled Officer Kowalski aside. Tell me exactly how you found the patient. Kowalski flipped open his notebook, though his eyes kept drifting back to the trauma bay. Anonymous 911 call at 4:32 a.m. Caller reported something huge and covered in hair moving through the market. We figured it was a bear, maybe came down from the Cascades. But when we arrived, no bear. Just a blood trail leading from a broken storefront window to an alley near the Athenian. That's where we found... that. He gestured helplessly. It was barely conscious, making these sounds, not words but not animal either, human adjacent, if that makes sense. Did anyone else see? Not that we know of. It was pre-dawn. Market wasn't open yet. We kept it quiet on the radio, just said, injured person, unknown circumstances. The broken window? Jewelry store. Looks like it might have been seeking shelter, or maybe it was disoriented. There's no evidence of attempted theft, just blood, and these... He held up his phone, showing a photo of the storefront. On the pavement outside were impressions, footprints, 17 inches long, with a distinctly non-human midfoot structure, but 5 toes and a clear heel strike. Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. I need you to do something for me, officer. I need you to seal that scene, take detailed photos and measurements, and then clean it up before the press gets wind of it. Can you do that? Doc, I have to report. Report an injured person was found and is receiving medical care. That's the truth. Everything else is speculation until we have facts. He held his gaze. If word gets out about what's in that trauma bay before we understand what we're dealing with, this building will be surrounded by media, curiosity seekers, and worse. Our patient, and yes, that's what they are, won't get the care they need. 24 hours. Give me 24 hours to figure this out. Kowalski studied her face, then nodded slowly. 24 hours. After that, it goes up the chain. Deal? Deal. The surgery took 3 hours. Maya worked with meticulous care, cleaning and debriding the wound, a deep laceration that had severed muscle but, miraculously, missed the femoral artery. The tissue structure was recognizably mammalian, but the muscle fiber density was unlike anything in her surgical experience. She counted suture passes, 83 interrupted stitches to close the dermis, another 40 for the subcutaneous layer. Throughout the procedure, the patient's vitals remained stable, the heart beating with the slow, powerful rhythm of an endurance athlete. As she worked, Maya studied the details. The leg hair wasn't fur, it was true hair, with the same follicular structure as human scalp hair, but in far greater density. The skin underneath showed evidence of old scars, some that looked like burns, others like claw marks. This individual had lived a hard life in an unforgiving environment. When she finally closed and bandaged the wound, Maya stripped off her gloves and found her hands were shaking again. She looked at the anesthesiologist. How much did you have to use? About triple the normal dose for someone this size. Whatever metabolic differences we're dealing with, they include serious drug tolerance. In the recovery area, Maya pulled up a chair beside the bed and waited. The patient's breathing gradually shifted from the deep anesthetic rhythm to something more natural. As dawn light began filtering through the narrow windows, the eyes opened. For a long moment, human and what? Post-human, para-human. The terminology didn't exist, regarded each other. Maya kept her body language open, non-threatening. She raised her hand slowly, pointing to herself. Maya, she said softly. The patient's eyes tracked the gesture. A hand, that remarkable hand with its intricate fingerprints, lifted slightly from the bed. The throat worked, producing a sound somewhere between a hum and a low rumble. The vocal anatomy was clearly different, the larynx positioned lower, the vocal cords thicker, but there was intentionality in the sound, an attempt at communication. Maya pointed to her patient. "You?" The patient's eyes closed briefly, a blink that somehow conveyed both exhaustion and understanding. Then the hand moved again, this time tracing a pattern in the air, a circle, then vertical lines, then another circle. The gesture was repeated, with emphasis. "You're trying to tell me something," Maya murmured. She grabbed a tablet from the nurse's station and pulled up a drawing app. Holding it where the patient could see, she sketched a simple stick figure. Then she pointed to herself and added details. Long hair, a stethoscope. The patient's breathing quickened slightly. Interest. One thick finger extended, pointing at the tablet. Maya placed it carefully on the edge of the bed, within reach. What followed took nearly 20 minutes. The patient's motor control was clearly compromised by injury and medication, but the intent was unmistakable. Slowly, laboriously, a drawing emerged. Mountains, rendered with surprising sophistication. Trees, shown in silhouette. And figures, multiple figures, clearly of the same species as her patient, in various poses. Gathering, resting, moving through the forest. A community. At the bottom of the screen, the patient traced a symbol, a handprint, 5-fingered, pressed against a rock face. Maya felt tears prick her eyes, though she couldn't have explained why. "You have a family," she whispered. "A people." The patient's eyes held hers. Then that massive hand moved again, tapping the image of the mountains, then pointing northwest, toward the Cascades, toward thousands of square miles of old-growth forest. "They're out there," Maya said. It wasn't a question, a single deliberate nod. "And you were separated. How did you end up in the city?" The drawing shifted. Stick figures, smaller and clearly human, with weapons, dogs. A chase scene rendered in quick, efficient strokes. Flight, exhaustion, and finally, that broken storefront window, drawn with jagged lines. "Someone was hunting you," Maya said, her voice tight with anger. Another nod. The implications crashed over Maya like a cold wave. This wasn't just a medical anomaly. This was a person from a population that had somehow remained hidden from modern science, from satellite imaging, from the entire apparatus of human civilization. A population that was now being actively threatened. She thought about her oath. First, do no harm. She thought about the fame, the Nobel Prizes, the complete rewriting of paleoanthropology that would come from proving this species existed. She thought about the media circus, the government intervention, the inevitable exploitation. Then she looked into those intelligent, frightened eyes and made a choice. "I'm going to help you," she said quietly, "but I need you to understand something. If word gets out about what you are, there will be consequences. Powerful people will want to study you, control you, use your existence for their own purposes. Some will want to protect you, but others," she shook her head, "others will see you as a resource or a threat. Either way, you'll never be free again." The patient watched her intently. "So here's what I'm proposing. I keep you hidden while you heal. I learn what I can to help your people. And when you're strong enough, I help you get back to your family. But in exchange, you need to teach me. Teach me what you need, what threatens you, how we can coexist without destroying each other. Can you do that?" The patient's hand rose, trembling slightly with effort, and extended toward Maya. She reached out carefully, and their hands met. Human and something beyond human. 5 fingers each, the same basic architecture separated by perhaps 500,000 years of divergent evolution. The grip was gentle but unmistakably firm. A pact, sealed without words. "Okay then," Maya said, her voice thick with emotion she didn't fully understand. "First thing, we need to run some tests. Blood work, genetic analysis. I promise I'll be discreet, but I need to understand your physiology if I'm going to properly care for you. And I need to—" A thought struck her with sudden urgency. She pulled out her phone and texted Chen. Incoming blood work under my patient code only. Do not enter standard hospital database. Direct results to my encrypted email. Priority Alpha. Confirm. The response came within seconds. Confirmed. But Maya, people are asking questions. She typed back, stall them. Patient has rare immunodeficiency. Quarantine protocol, 24-hour assessment before clearance. Not entirely a lie. She had no idea what diseases or pathogens might be zoonotic between their species. The patient had been watching this exchange with visible intelligence. Now that remarkable hand moved again, drawing on the tablet, a question mark rendered surprisingly well. I'm protecting you, Maya explained, making sure the wrong people don't find out about you before we're ready. The patient's expression, insofar as she could read those heavy, archaic features, seemed to hold something like approval, or perhaps relief. Over the next 6 hours, Maya orchestrated the most delicate medical subterfuge of her career. She moved the patient to a private room in the hospital's research wing, a space normally used for clinical trials. She personally drew blood samples, taking care to label them only with anonymous codes. She arranged for a trusted colleague in genetics, Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, who owed Maya several favors and asked minimal questions, to run a preliminary DNA analysis off the books. When the results came back late that afternoon, Maya sat in her office with the door locked and read them 3 times. Unable to fully process what she was seeing, the genetic profile was hominid, unquestionably. But the divergence from Homo sapiens ran deep. mtDNA that suggested a split from the modern human lineage approximately 500,000 years ago, shortly after the Homo heidelbergensis period. Nuclear DNA showed evidence of both archaic human admixture, small percentages of Neanderthal and Denisovan markers, and unique mutations that had never been documented in any human population. The chromosome count was identical to humans, 23 pairs. But chromosome 2, formed by the fusion of 2 ancestral chromosomes in the human line, showed a different fusion pattern here, evidence of parallel evolution along a similar but not identical path. Most striking were the genes associated with muscle density, metabolic efficiency, and, Sarah had highlighted this section in red, vocal tract development. The FOXP2 gene, so crucial to human language ability, was present, but with several key differences in regulatory regions. This species could vocalize, probably with sophistication, but their language would sound nothing like human speech. Maya sent Sarah a brief message. Delete all records of this analysis. Destroy physical samples. I'll explain later, but trust me, this is necessary. Sarah's response, already done. But Maya, whatever you've found, be careful. As evening fell over Seattle, Maya returned to the private room. Her patient was awake, sitting upright now, the bandaged leg elevated. The overhead lights had been dimmed. She'd noticed earlier that bright artificial light seemed to cause discomfort. I have your test results, Maya said, pulling up a chair, and I have about 1,000 questions. But first, I need to tell you what I found. She pulled up a simplified genetic diagram on her tablet, showing 2 branching lines diverging from a common ancestor. You and I, we're related. Cousins separated by hundreds of thousands of years. Your people split off from the line that eventually became modern humans, probably around the time our ancestors were still in Africa. You evolved parallel to us, but differently. Stronger, more adapted to cold climates, with different vocal capabilities. The patient leaned forward, studying the diagram with unmistakable fascination. The question is, how did your people stay hidden? With satellites, thermal imaging, environmental DNA sampling, how is it possible that a population large enough to be genetically viable remained undetected? Her patient considered this for a long moment. Then those skilled hands began to draw again, a map of North America, surprisingly accurate. Marks appeared in the Pacific Northwest, the Northern Rockies, possibly Alaska. Then arrows, showing seasonal movement patterns. Caves, drawn with emphasis on depth and complexity, water sources, underground streams. You migrate, Maya said, following the logic, following ancient routes that avoid human settlements, living in terrain that's too remote or rugged for casual human access, and you're smart about it, traveling at night, using water to mask scent trails, staying in caves that don't show up on thermal imaging because of the thermal mass of the rock. A nod, vigorous enough to indicate excitement at being understood. But it's getting harder, isn't it? More hikers, more cameras, more development pushing into what used to be wilderness. The patient's expression, if she was reading it correctly, turned grim. The drawing shifted to show human figures with guns, vehicles, tracking dogs. Then, a symbol Maya didn't immediately understand. A circle with radiating lines. I don't. What does that mean? The patient tapped the screen in frustration, then pointed to the window, to the darkening sky. Night? Stars? Maya guessed. A shake of the head. The patient pointed to her own eyes, then drew the symbol again with exaggerated care. Something you can see, Maya murmured. Light? No, not just light. And then it clicked. Cameras, trail cameras with infrared flashes. You can see them. An emphatic nod. Your eyes see into the infrared spectrum, Maya said slowly. That's how you avoid game cameras. You can literally see them activating. She laughed despite herself. That's brilliant. Adaptive evolution for survival in deep forest where heat signature detection would be advantageous for hunting, and it accidentally protects you from human surveillance technology. The patient's eyes crinkled slightly. Could that be a smile? They worked together late into the night, developing a shared vocabulary of gestures and simple drawings. Maya learned that the patient's people, she still didn't have a name for the species, and somehow asking felt presumptuous, lived in extended family groups of 15 to 30 individuals. They had complex social structures, with elders who kept oral histories passed down through generations. They had art, cave paintings in locations so remote that no human had ever found them, depicting hunts, births, deaths, and something that looked almost like star charts. They had names. Though communicating them was challenging with such different vocal anatomy, the patient tried several times to vocalize their own name, producing sounds that ranged from subsonic rumbles to high-pitched keens that made Maya's teeth ache. Finally, the patient drew a symbol, a handprint surrounded by 5 dots, arranged like the points of a compass. 5, Maya said. You're the 5th child? Or born on the 5th day of something? The patient touched Maya's hand, then held up 5 fingers. 5 fingers, Maya murmured. The thing we have in common. Is that what you're called? Something that means kin or relative? The response was a gentle pressure on her hand. Affirmation. Then I'll call you kin, Maya said, if that's acceptable to you. Kin's eyes closed in what was clearly a gesture of approval. It was nearly midnight when Maya finally left the hospital, her mind reeling with implications. She'd violated a dozen protocols, possibly broken several laws, and committed herself to protecting a secret that would rewrite human history. The rational part of her brain screamed that she should report this immediately to proper authorities. But she kept thinking about those intelligent eyes, that gentle handshake, the careful drawings that showed a rich culture and a desperate struggle for survival. She thought about what would happen if the world knew, the military studies, the genetic experiments, the zoos, the reserves, the complete loss of autonomy for a people who had fought for hundreds of thousands of years to remain free. As she drove home through the rain-slicked streets of Seattle, Maya made a decision. She would honor her pact. She would learn what she could, heal her patient, and help kin return home. And she would spend the rest of her life carrying the weight of the most profound secret in human history. 24 hours, Officer Kowalski had said. She had already used 16 of them. The clock was ticking. Maya arrived at the hospital at 5 a.m. The next morning, carrying a duffel bag filled with items she'd spent half the night assembling, sketching supplies, a portable whiteboard, photographs of local wilderness areas, and, after a moment of uncertainty, a small collection of stones and carved wood pieces she'd found at a craft store. If Kin's people had a material culture, perhaps she could learn something from their response to different textures and forms. The private research wing was quiet at this hour, with only a skeleton night staff who'd been told that Room 7 housed an immunocompromised patient under strict quarantine protocols. Maya had counted on human nature working in her favor. Tell medical professionals someone might be dangerously infectious, and they'll generally avoid that room unless absolutely necessary. She found Kin awake, sitting cross-legged on the bed despite the injured leg, a position that should have been agonizing, but which Kin maintained with apparent comfort. The patient's pain tolerance was remarkable. Maya had reduced the morphine drip to minimal levels 12 hours ago, and Kin had shown no signs of distress. "Good morning," Maya said softly, setting down her bag. "How's the leg?" Kin extended the limb carefully. The bandaging was still clean, no signs of bleeding or infection. Those unusual eyes tracked Maya's face, then moved to the bag with unmistakable curiosity. "I brought some things," Maya explained, unzipping the duffel. "Communication tools, mostly. But also, I wanted to see if any of these felt familiar to you." She laid out the stones first. River rock, granite, obsidian, sandstone. Kin leaned forward immediately, massive hands moving with surprising delicacy. The obsidian drew particular attention. Kin lifted it, turned it to catch the early morning light, then made a series of gestures, a striking motion, a cutting motion, a scraping motion. "You use obsidian for tools," Maya said. "Napping, like early humans did." Kin set the obsidian down carefully and reached for Maya's tablet, which she'd left within reach overnight. The drawing that emerged showed hands working stone, flakes falling away, and the progression from raw material to finished blade. But there was something else in the image. Symbols carved into the flat side of the blade, marks that looked almost like tally marks, or perhaps a primitive script. "You mark your tools," Maya breathed. "Record keeping, or identification of ownership?" Kin drew more, different symbols on different blades, and figures associated with each one. A narrative emerged. Each blade belonged to a specific individual, and the marks might indicate lineage, skill level, or perhaps significant achievements. One symbol appeared frequently, that same 5-pointed handprint surrounded by variations of dots and lines. "That's your clan marker," Maya guessed. "The handprint means family or group." Kin's expression, she was getting better at reading the subtle shifts of those archaic features, showed pleasure at being understood. The drawing continued, showing what looked like a communal gathering, multiple individuals presenting their marked stones to an elder figure. "Ceremonies," Maya said. "Ritualized knowledge transfer. You have traditions." Over the next 3 hours, they developed a more sophisticated communication system. Maya discovered that Kin could understand a significant amount of spoken English. Not the words themselves, but the tone, cadence, and emotional content. When Maya spoke slowly and used gesture to reinforce meaning, comprehension was remarkably high. Conversely, Kin's vocalizations, while impossible for Maya to replicate, followed consistent patterns. A low rumble meant approval or agreement. A higher-pitched keen indicated distress or warning. A series of clicks and subsonic pulses seemed to be used for more complex ideas, though Maya suspected she was missing much of the information carried in frequency ranges beyond human hearing. The breakthrough came when Maya wrote the word water in large block letters and paired it with the universal gesture of drinking. Kin studied the letters intently, then picked up a marker and carefully, laboriously traced the letters. The motor control was there, but it clearly required immense concentration. "You can learn to write," Maya said, excitement rising. "Your hands have the dexterity, and you understand symbolic representation. Kin, do you want to learn our written language?" The response was immediate. Kin touched the tablet, drew that 5-fingered handprint, then pointed from it to Maya and back again. A bridge, a connection. Yes, Maya whispered, a bridge between our peoples. They spent the rest of the morning on basic vocabulary. Maya would write a word, demonstrate its meaning, and Kin would practice tracing the letters. Progress was slow but steady. By noon, Kin could recognize and reproduce about 20 written words. Water, food, sleep, pain, help, home, family, forest, mountain, danger, human, kin, friend, safe, heal, walk, run, hide, night, day. As they worked, Maya couldn't help but catalogue the anatomical marvels before her. Kin's hands, despite their size, showed evidence of remarkable fine motor control. The fingertips were calloused but sensitive, with a dense network of nerve endings that suggested a highly developed sense of touch. The thumb opposability was, if anything, more pronounced than in humans, allowing for precision grips that would be the envy of any surgeon. The facial structure, while so different from human norms, expressed emotion with surprising clarity once Maya learned to read the signs. The heavy brow ridge wasn't just an archaic feature. It housed enlarged sinuses that likely helped with scent processing and vocalization resonance. The broad, flat nose showed adaptations for cold air warming. The receding chin hid a robust jaw capable of processing tougher plant matter than the modern human diet allowed. This wasn't a missing link or an evolutionary dead end. This was a fully realized species, perfectly adapted to its ecological niche, with a rich culture and complex cognition. The tragedy was that their niche was disappearing. At lunchtime, Maya brought food: roasted chicken, sweet potatoes, fresh greens, and various fruits. She'd deliberately chosen a variety to learn about Kin's dietary preferences. The response was educational. Kin ate the chicken with obvious enjoyment, efficiently stripping meat from bone with practiced ease. The sweet potatoes were consumed entirely, including the skin. The greens were inspected carefully before eating. Kin seemed to be assessing freshness or perhaps checking for specific plant species. The fruits were divided into two piles. Apples and berries were eaten immediately, but citrus fruits were left untouched. "Citrus doesn't grow in your range," Maya observed. "You've never encountered it before, so you're cautious." Kin picked up an orange, sniffed it, then very carefully peeled away a small section of skin and touched the juice to their tongue. The reaction was immediate, a grimace and a sharp exhale. Too acidic, perhaps, or simply too alien to the accustomed flavor profile. "Fair enough," Maya said, setting the citrus aside. "We'll stick with temperate forest foods." After the meal, as afternoon light streamed through the windows, Kin began to show signs of restlessness. The injured leg had healed with remarkable speed. Already the inflammation was down, and when Maya checked the sutures, the tissue showed knitting that would normally take several days. Whatever metabolic advantages Kin's species possessed, rapid healing was clearly among them. "You want to move," Maya said. "Being confined is hard for you." Kin nodded emphatically, then drew on the tablet. "Trees, open space, the sky. I can't let you outside, not yet. It's too dangerous." Maya saw the frustration in those expressive eyes and felt a pang of guilt. This was a creature, no, a person, adapted for ranging across dozens of miles of territory. Being confined to a single room must be psychological torture. An idea struck her. "Wait here, I'll be right back." She returned 15 minutes later with a wheelchair and a conspiratorial smile. "The hospital has a rooftop garden. It's restricted access, usually for staff meditation breaks. At this hour, it should be empty. We can get you some fresh air at least." Kin's entire demeanor changed. The massive frame actually trembled slightly with anticipation. Getting Kin into the wheelchair required some creative positioning. The standard medical equipment wasn't designed for someone 8 feet tall and approximately 400 pounds of solid muscle. But they managed, and Maya draped a hospital blanket over Kin's distinctive form, then added a surgical mask and cap for additional concealment. "If we see anyone, you're a severe burn patient," Maya explained. "Full coverage for skin grafts. Don't make eye contact." And for God's sake, don't stand up. The freight elevator ride to the roof was tense. Maya's heart hammered at every floor ding, certain they'd be discovered. But the elevator was empty, and when the doors opened to the rooftop access, the space beyond was blessedly vacant. The rooftop garden was small, maybe 30 by 40 feet, but it was outdoors. Seattle's perpetual cloud cover hung low overhead, and the air carried the scent of salt water from the Puget Sound, mixing with the urban smells of concrete and car exhaust. To Maya, it was unremarkable, but Kin's reaction was profound. The moment they wheeled outside, Kin's head tilted back, nostrils flaring, processing air currents with an intensity Maya could almost feel. Those remarkable eyes scanned the horizon, tracking the outline of the Cascade Mountains barely visible through the haze to the east. A low sound emerged from Kin's throat, not quite a moan, not quite a sigh, but something that carried such profound longing that Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "That's home," she said quietly. "Out there, in those mountains." Kin's hand reached out, pointing northwest, then made a complex gesture. Far, very far, but specific. A location, precise and remembered. "How far did you travel to get here?" Maya wondered. 30 miles. 50. Kin held up both hands, fingers spread, then repeated the gesture multiple times. At least 100 miles, maybe more. A journey that must have taken days, injured and pursued. "Why didn't you go back?" Maya asked. "After you escaped whoever was hunting you, why come into the city instead of returning to your people?" The answer was drawn on the tablet, which Maya had brought along. Stick figures, several of them, wearing the distinctive gear of hunters. Dogs. And crucially, a camp positioned directly between where Kin had marked their home territory and their current location. Kin had been cut off, unable to return without encountering the hunters again. "So, you went the only direction available, toward the city, where there would be crowds and confusion," Maya said. "You were hoping to hide in plain sight or at least pass through without being detected. But you were too injured, too exhausted, and you ended up crashing through that window." Kin's shoulders, massive, powerful shoulders adapted for climbing and carrying, slumped in what was clearly shame or regret. "Hey," Maya said firmly, "you survived. Against impossible odds, you survived long enough to find help. That's not failure, that's remarkable." She moved the wheelchair to the garden's edge, where a few hardy plants grew in raised beds. Lavender, sage, a small Japanese maple. Kin reached out carefully, touching the lavender, bringing fingers to nose to inhale the scent. Then that massive hand moved to the maple, tracing the delicate leaves with a gentleness that made Maya's breath catch. "You have a relationship with plants," she observed. "Not just as food, but as, what? Companions, teachers." Kin pulled out the tablet and drew with quick, sure strokes, plants with roots exposed and human-adjacent figures tending them. Not agriculture exactly, but something like cultivation or stewardship. Then another image. Specific plants with emphasis marks and figures consuming them, followed by symbols that might indicate healing or altered consciousness. "Ethnobotany," Maya breathed. "You have medicinal knowledge, possibly psychoactive plant use for ritual purposes." She thought about the implications. A pre-agricultural species that nonetheless understood plant properties and cultivation. How much knowledge was encoded in Kin's oral traditions? How many millennia of accumulated wisdom about the Pacific Northwest ecosystem existed nowhere except in the minds of Kin's people? "If your species disappears," Maya said slowly, "we don't just lose a genetic line. We lose an entire library of knowledge about how to live in balance with this landscape. Knowledge that took hundreds of thousands of years to accumulate." Kin turned those ancient eyes to her, and Maya saw acknowledgement there, and more. A plea. "Remember us. Honor what we know. Don't let it be for nothing." They stayed on the roof for nearly an hour, until Maya's pager buzzed with an urgent message from Chen. Kowalski asking questions. Running out of stall tactics. "Need you." "We have to go back," Maya said reluctantly, "but we'll do this again, I promise." The return to room 7 was uneventful, but Maya's mind was racing. Officer Kowalski's 24-hour deadline had passed. She'd bought a few extra hours with her quarantine story, but that wouldn't hold much longer. She needed a plan for getting Kin out of the hospital and back to the wilderness without detection. And she needed to figure out how to address the hunter camp that blocked Kin's route home. That evening, after ensuring Kin was settled for the night, Maya met with Dr. Sarah Okonkwo in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the hospital. Sarah was a geneticist Maya had known since their residency days, someone whose discretion was matched only by her curiosity. "I destroyed the samples like you asked," Sarah said without preamble, sliding into the booth across from Maya. "But first I made an encrypted backup of the data on an air-gapped drive that I'll give you tonight. And I need you to tell me what the hell is going on." Maya stirred her coffee, weighing her words carefully. "If I tell you, you become complicit in something that's either the greatest scientific discovery of the century or a career-ending scandal. Possibly both. You sure you want to know?" "Maya, I've known you for 15 years. You don't ask me to break protocol for anything less than literally life-or-death circumstances. So yes, I want to know." Maya looked around the cafe, mostly empty at this late hour, then leaned in close. "The sample I gave you came from a species that diverged from Homo sapiens approximately 500,000 years ago. A living, breathing, conscious individual who is currently healing from traumatic injuries in my care. A person who has a family, a culture, and a desperate need for continued anonymity if they're going to survive." Sarah's face went through a rapid progression. Disbelief, shock, analysis, and finally awed comprehension. "You're telling me—" "I'm not telling you anything," Maya interrupted. "I'm asking you for a favor. I need genetic markers that would explain the unusual DNA profile in a way that doesn't point to a new species. Something rare but theoretically possible in modern humans. Can you do that?" "You want me to fabricate a medical explanation," Sarah said slowly. "I want you to give me plausible deniability for my patient's privacy," Maya corrected. "Something that justifies my protective protocols without requiring me to disclose information that could endanger my patient's entire population." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her analytical mind clearly working through the implications. Finally, she said, "Chimerism. If I manipulate the data slightly, I could make it look like your patient has tetragametic chimerism, a condition where 2 embryos fuse in utero, creating an individual with 2 distinct DNA profiles. It's rare, but documented. The unusual genetic markers could be explained as the absorbed twin having extremely atypical mutations, possibly from unknown ancestry or de novo mutations. It wouldn't hold up under intense scrutiny, but it would give you cover for immediate purposes. How long would it take to generate that false data trail? Give me 2 days. But Maya, this is just a band-aid. Eventually someone's going to want to dig deeper. I know, but I only need enough time to get my patient home. After that," Maya shrugged, "after that, they disappear back into the wilderness, and the world keeps turning in ignorance. Maybe that's for the best." Sarah handed over a small thumb drive. "Here's the real data. Keep it somewhere secure. Somewhere it can't be accidentally discovered, but also can't be permanently lost. Whatever you found, it's too important to vanish completely." "Thank you," Maya said quietly. "I know what I'm asking carries enormous risk." "Yeah, well," Sarah smiled slightly. "That's what friends are for. Just be careful. If there are people hunting your patient, as you implied, they're not going to stop just because you've helped them escape. You might be putting yourself in danger." Maya thought about Kin's drawing of the hunter camp, the guns, the dogs. "I know, but I can't look into those eyes and choose publication over protection. I just can't." They parted ways outside the cafe, and Maya returned to the hospital. She found Kin awake, working with the tablet by the dim light of the bedside lamp. The drawing was elaborate, clearly something Kin had been laboring over for hours. "What is this?" Maya asked, settling into the chair. Kin pointed to the image, then to themselves, then to Maya. A story, Maya realized, a history. The drawings showed a family group, Adults, juveniles, infants. Kin was identifiable by size and the consistent five-dot symbol. The images progressed chronologically, teaching a young kin to nap stone tools. Kin's first successful hunt, something that looked like an elk, a ceremony where an elder painted symbols on Kin's chest and arms. The death of a parent, shown with remarkable emotional weight in the simple lines of grieving figures, and more recently, the birth of a child, Kin's child, held carefully in those massive hands. "You're a parent," Maya whispered. "You have a baby waiting for you." Kin's eyes filled with tears, that universal expression of grief and longing that transcended species. The drawing continued, the child being cared for by others, while Kin went on some kind of mission or journey. Then the hunters, the pursuit, the separation. "How long have you been away from your child?" Maya asked, though she wasn't sure Kin had a way to answer. Time measurement might be completely different for them. Kin held up fingers, then pointed to the moon visible through the window. Lunar cycles. The fingers showed 3, maybe 4. 3 or 4 months, Maya calculated. "And you haven't been able to get back because of the hunter camp." The anguish in Kin's expression was answer enough. Maya made a decision. "I'm going to help you get home, but I need to know more about those hunters. Can you describe them? Any details that might help me identify who they are and what they want?" The drawing shifted to focus on the hunters. 3 human figures, male based on the body proportions. One wore a hat with a wide brim. Another had a symbol on their jacket that looked like wings or possibly a bird. The third carried what was clearly high-end equipment. Camera with telephoto lens, possibly thermal imaging gear. "Not casual hikers," Maya observed. "These are people with resources and specific intent. The camera suggests they're trying to document your species. The bird symbol might be a logo or organizational marker." She pulled out her phone and did a quick search for wildlife research organizations in the Pacific Northwest. Several used bird imagery in their logos, but one made her pause: the Corvid Conservation Initiative, a private organization funded by a tech billionaire who'd made his fortune in AI and had subsequently become obsessed with cryptozoology. "Oh no," Maya muttered. "Please don't let it be Edmund Ross." Kin reacted to the name. Not recognition exactly, but a response to Maya's tone. Maya pulled up Ross's photo on her phone. "Is this one of the hunters?" Kin leaned close, studying the image, then shook their head. But the finger pointed to the bird symbol on Ross's organization's website, a stylized raven. "His people, then," Maya said. "Ross funds expeditions to find cryptids, animals thought to be mythological. He's been financing searches for Bigfoot for the past decade." She looked at Kin. "You're not a myth to him. You're a discovery he wants to claim." The implications were chilling. If Ross's people had found evidence of Kin's species, they wouldn't stop. They'd have funding, technology, and the persistence of true believers finally proven right. Getting Kin home wouldn't just require medical care, it would require evading a well-funded tracking operation. "I'm in way over my head," Maya said aloud, more to herself than to Kin. Kin's hand reached out, gently touching Maya's arm. Then those skilled fingers took the stylus and wrote, slowly but clearly, "Friend." "Yeah," Maya said, her throat tight. "Friends, that's what we are. Which means I'm going to figure this out, no matter what it takes." She spent the rest of the night planning. By dawn, she had the skeleton of a strategy. Use Sarah's falsified data to buy a few more days, quietly arrange for camping gear and supplies under the guise of a personal hiking trip, research the location of Ross's base camp through Forestry Service records, and arrange for a discreet discharge from the hospital during a shift change when security would be minimal. It was risky, probably illegal, and would likely cost Maya her career if discovered. But as she watched Kin sleep, saw the powerful chest rise and fall with breath that had been breathed by an unbroken line of ancestors stretching back 500,000 years, Maya knew she'd already made her choice. Some secrets were worth protecting, some truths were too dangerous to tell, and some friendships transcended species, built not on genetic similarity, but on mutual recognition of consciousness, dignity, and the fundamental right to survive. 3 days later, at 2:47 a.m., on a moonless October night, Maya Reeves committed several felonies in rapid succession. She disabled the security camera in the research wing with a strategically placed piece of tape and a malfunctioning equipment notice. She forged discharge papers for a patient who didn't exist in official records, and she helped an 8-foot-tall representative of an undiscovered species escape from a major metropolitan hospital in the back of her Honda CR-V, hidden under camping gear and tarps. "This is insane," she muttered to herself as she drove north on I-5, checking her mirrors constantly for any sign of pursuit. Completely, absolutely insane. From the back of the vehicle came a low rumble, Kin's version of reassurance, or possibly agreement. Hard to tell. The leg had healed with remarkable speed. When Maya had removed the sutures that morning, the wound had already knitted into a thick pink scar that would probably fade to near invisibility within a few weeks. Kin moved with only a slight limp, and even that seemed to be improving by the hour. Whatever evolutionary pressures had shaped this species, rapid healing was clearly an essential survival trait. They'd refined their communication system over the past 72 hours. Kin could now write approximately 200 English words, though the penmanship was shaky and clearly required immense effort. More importantly, they developed a shared gestural vocabulary that allowed for complex exchanges. Maya found herself able to read Kin's body language with increasing accuracy, and Kin seemed equally attuned to Maya's emotional states. The plan was straightforward in concept, if terrifying in execution: drive to a trailhead in the Cascade foothills that Kin had identified as being approximately 15 miles from their home territory. From there, hike deep enough into the wilderness to bypass the area where Ross's team had established their monitoring camp. Once past that perimeter, Kin would be able to navigate home independently, using routes and landmarks that were meaningless to humans, but clear as highways to someone who'd traveled them for decades. The tricky part was timing the approach to avoid Ross's people. Maya had done her research. The Corvid Conservation Initiative had leased land adjacent to Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest and established a research station that was essentially a forward operating base for cryptid tracking. They had motion sensors, trail cameras, and, according to one blog post from a disgruntled former volunteer, drones equipped with thermal imaging. But they also had shifts, patterns, and human limitations. Maya had spent hours reviewing satellite imagery and cross-referencing it with Forestry Service reports, looking for the gaps in coverage. She'd found one: a narrow corridor along an old decommissioned logging road that passed within a mile of the research station but remained outside their camera grid, possibly because the dense old-growth canopy blocked aerial surveillance. It was their best shot, maybe their only shot. They reached the trailhead just before dawn. Maya parked in a turnout half a mile down the road, trying to make the vehicle look like it belonged to an early morning fisherman or wildlife photographer. She'd packed meticulously: 2 full backpacks of supplies, including food that matched Kin's dietary preferences, a first aid kit, water purification tablets, fire-starting materials, and, after a moment of grim consideration, a can of bear spray and a flare gun. She had no idea if they'd be useful, but they made her feel slightly less helpless. Kin emerged from the vehicle carefully, testing the leg, then stretched with visible relief. Being confined for days had clearly been torture for someone adapted to ranging freely. In the pre-dawn darkness, with only starlight filtering through the clouds, Kin's form was barely visible, a shadow among shadows, moving with the careful silence of a species that had perfected the art of not being noticed. "Okay," Maya whispered, though sound discipline was probably unnecessary this far from any human habitation. "You lead. I'll follow." We move quietly, we move carefully, and if you sense anything wrong, we stop immediately. Agreed. Kin's hand found hers in the darkness, that now familiar gesture of pact and trust, and squeezed gently. They hiked. Maya had always considered herself reasonably fit. She ran 3 times a week, did yoga, could manage a 10-mile trail hike without excessive suffering. But following Kin through the forest, she felt clumsy and loud, crashing through undergrowth that Kin navigated silently, stumbling over roots that Kin seemed to sense without looking. Kin's movement through the forest was a revelation. Despite the size and weight, each step was placed with precision, weight distributed to avoid snapping twigs or crushing noisy ground cover. The massive frame seemed to flow around obstacles, reading the terrain with senses Maya couldn't fathom. Occasionally Kin would pause, head tilted, processing information from sounds or scents Maya couldn't detect, then adjust their route accordingly. As dawn light began filtering through the canopy, Maya caught her first real glimpse of Kin in their natural environment, and the transformation was stunning. In the hospital, Kin had seemed large and out of place, a wild creature trapped in an artificial space. Here, among the Douglas firs and western red cedars, with fog curling through the undergrowth and moss-covered stones dotting the forest floor, Kin looked perfectly at home. This was the environment that had shaped Kin's species, and the adaptation was beautiful to witness. They'd been hiking for approximately 3 hours when Kin suddenly froze, one hand raised in a stop signal they'd agreed upon. Maya halted immediately, her heart rate spiking. She heard nothing, saw nothing unusual, just the normal sounds of a Pacific Northwest forest in autumn. But Kin was sensing something. The massive head turned slowly, processing, and then those remarkable eyes focused on a point about 30 degrees to their left. Kin gestured camera, then pointed up into the canopy. And Maya strained her eyes and finally spotted it. A trail camera secured to a branch about 15 feet up, positioned to capture anything moving along the game trail they'd been following. It was sophisticated equipment, weatherproofed and probably solar-powered, with a clear view of the path for 100 yards in either direction. Ross's equipment, Maya mouthed. Kin nodded, then gestured a different direction. A steep, rocky slope covered in loose shale and fallen timber. The detour would be difficult and time-consuming, but it would keep them off camera. They spent the next 2 hours navigating terrain that made Maya's earlier assessment of her fitness seem hilariously optimistic. The slope was brutal, requiring her to use both hands to scramble up sections, while Kin climbed with ape-like agility, occasionally pausing to offer a hand when Maya struggled with a particularly difficult section. At the top of the ridge, they stopped to rest and drink water. Maya was winded, sweating despite the morning chill. Kin, conversely, seemed barely affected by the climb, breathing easily through that broad nose. "This is routine for you," Maya observed quietly. "This terrain that's pushing me to my limits, you travel through it regularly." Kin's expression seemed almost apologetic, as if embarrassed by the disparity in their capabilities. "Don't," Maya said. "I'm in awe, not ashamed. Your people are perfectly adapted to this environment. That's something to be proud of." From their elevated position, Maya could see smoke in the distance, probably from Ross's base camp. They were close to the perimeter, threading through the gap in surveillance coverage. If Maya's research was accurate, they'd clear the danger zone within another 2 or 3 miles. As they prepared to descend the far side of the ridge, Kin suddenly pulled out a small object from a pouch. Maya hadn't even realized Kin was carrying anything beyond what was provided. It was a stone, smooth and dark, with symbols carefully incised into its surface, that familiar 5-fingered handprint, surrounded by marks that might have been a date or a name or a prayer. Kin placed the stone carefully on a flat boulder, then gestured for Maya to approach. With careful movements, Kin took Maya's hand and pressed it against the stone beside their own much larger hand. Then Kin drew something in the dust beside the stone. 2 hands, different sizes, touching. A marker, Maya said, understanding. A record that we were here together, that this meeting happened. Kin nodded, then added more marks. Symbols that might have been temporal indicators, or perhaps a blessing, or a name given to this place where human and other had traveled together. Your people will find this? Maya asked. Another nod. Kin's people evidently traveled known routes, checking specific waypoints where messages could be left. This stone would tell them that Kin had survived, had received help from a human, and was returning home. Will they understand? Maya wondered. Will they believe you about me? Kin took the tablet, carefully protected in a waterproof case, and wrote slowly, "They know humans some good." Some good, Maya repeated with a sad smile. Yeah, that's probably the most we can aspire to as a species. Some of us are good sometimes. They continued their descent. The forest grew denser as they dropped into a valley, the old-growth canopy so thick that the understory was relatively clear, easier walking but also more open sightlines. Kin moved even more carefully here, pausing frequently to listen and scent the air. It was early afternoon when they encountered the first sign of Ross's operation, a clearing that had been artificially widened, with a motion sensor mounted on a portable stand and several boot prints in the muddy ground. The camp was closer than Maya's satellite imagery had suggested. Kin gestured urgently, "Hide!" They moved into a dense thicket of salal bushes, crouching low, and waited. Within 10 minutes, Maya heard voices. Two men emerged from the trees carrying equipment, a portable generator, and what looked like battery packs for cameras. They were discussing camera placement, completely unaware they were being observed from 30 feet away. 12 more sensors along the northwest quadrant, one man said. Ross wants total coverage before the weather turns. He really thinks we're close? The other replied, skeptical. He's convinced. Keeps talking about that blood sample from Seattle. Says he's got a source at Harborview who confirmed the patient had unusual characteristics before disappearing. Maya's blood ran cold. Someone at the hospital had talked. Despite her precautions, information had leaked. Unusual how? The skeptical man asked. Wouldn't say, but Ross is offering a $100,000 bonus to whoever gets clear photo or video documentation. He knows something's out here, and he's not stopping until he finds it. The men moved on, their voices fading into the forest. Maya and Kin remained hidden for another 20 minutes, ensuring the area was clear, then carefully circled wide around the motion sensor. "We need to move faster," Maya whispered. "If Ross knows you were at the hospital, he might be able to trace it to me, and if he can do that, he might predict that I'd help you. We could be walking into a trap." Kin's response was to quicken the pace. The limp now completely gone, moving with fluid efficiency through terrain that made Maya stumble and gasp for breath. They traveled for another 3 hours, the forest gradually changing character as they climbed into higher elevations. The Douglas firs gave way to mountain hemlock, the undergrowth thinned, and the air grew noticeably colder. As the afternoon light began to fade, Kin suddenly stopped and turned to Maya. The expression on that archaic face was complex. Relief, anticipation, but also something like sadness. Kin pointed ahead to a rocky outcropping barely visible through the trees, then gestured back the way they'd come. The message was clear. Kin's territory began here. This was where they'd part ways. "Already?" Maya said, though she'd known this moment would come. "I thought we had a few more miles." Kin shook their head, then wrote on the tablet, "Safe now. You go. Thank you." "What about you? Your family? How far is it?" Kin held up fingers. "Not far. A few miles at most, well within Kin's home range." Maya felt an unexpected surge of emotion. They'd known each other for less than a week, had communicated mostly through gestures and simple drawings, came from lineages that had been separated for 500,000 years, and yet the bond felt profound in a way Maya couldn't fully articulate. "I'm going to miss you," she said, her voice thick. "Is that strange? Missing someone I can barely talk to?" Kin's hand reached out, touching Maya's face gently, a gesture that felt both alien and deeply familiar. Then Kin took the tablet and wrote carefully, "Friend." Always friend. Remember kin. Remember all. I'll remember, Maya promised. Every day for the rest of my life, I'll remember that you exist, that your people exist, that there's so much more to this world than we understand. Kin reached into the pouch again and pulled out another stone, smaller than the first. This one was marked with that handprint symbol on one side, and on the other, a carefully rendered image of what might have been a face. Kin's face, or perhaps a more generic representation of their species. For me, Maya asked. Kin pressed it into her palm and closed Maya's fingers around it, then added a gesture. Secret. This stone was to be kept private, not shared, not displayed. A token between friends. I understand, Maya said. I'll keep it safe. And She paused, thinking about what she could offer in return. She pulled off her hospital ID badge, the one that gave her access to secure areas, the one she'd worn every day for 11 years. This is who I am in my world, my name, my role. I want you to have it so your people know that I'm real too, that somewhere out there, there's a human who knows about you and who chose to protect you. Kin took the badge reverently, studying Maya's photo with clear interest, running fingers over the printed letters of her name. If you ever need help again, Maya continued, if your people ever need medical care or assistance, leave a sign at that boulder where you placed the first stone. I'll check it, not often. I can't risk regular trips, but seasonally, maybe once every few months. If there's a message, I'll find a way to help. Okay? Kin pulled Maya into an embrace, gentle despite the enormous strength differential. Maya hugged back, feeling the strange texture of that hair-covered skin, the warmth of the massive body, the steady drumbeat of that powerful heart. When they separated, Kin's eyes were wet again. Those tears, that universal expression of emotion, were perhaps the most profound evidence of kinship. They'd evolved separately for eons, but grief, joy, affection, these transcended the gaps. Kin turned and began to walk away, then paused and looked back. One more drawing on the tablet quickly rendered, a small figure held in careful hands, a child, Kin's child, waiting somewhere in these mountains. Go, Maya said, smiling through her own tears. Go home to your baby, be safe. Kin moved into the forest and within moments was invisible, a shadow that belonged to the wilderness, impossible to track without knowing exactly where to look. Maya watched the space where Kin had vanished, then turned and began the long hike back to her vehicle. The return journey took until well after dark. Maya used her headlamp sparingly, relying on moonlight when possible, paranoid about being spotted by Ross's people. She gave the research station a wide berth, adding an extra mile to the hike, and didn't relax until she reached the turnout where her car sat undisturbed. The drive back to Seattle was surreal. Maya kept glancing at the stone in her cup holder, the weight of the secret it represented pressing down on her. She'd helped a member of an unknown species escape detection, possibly altered the course of human understanding of evolution, and definitely committed crimes that could land her in prison if discovered, and she'd do it again without hesitation. By the time she reached her apartment, dawn was breaking over Puget Sound. Maya showered, changed into clean clothes, and made coffee with trembling hands. Then she sat down at her laptop and began typing a document that she'd encrypt and hide in multiple secure locations. It was a full account of everything that had happened: the patient's arrival, the genetic analysis, the communication they'd developed, the details of Kin's culture and biology, and the final journey into the Cascades. She included Sarah's genetic data, photographs she'd surreptitiously taken of Kin's drawings, and her own medical observations. She ended the document with a reflection. I've taken an oath to preserve life and reduce suffering. By conventional standards, I should have reported my patient's existence immediately. The scientific value, the anthropological implications, the sheer magnitude of the discovery, all of these argue for disclosure. But I looked into those eyes and saw a person. Not a specimen, not a research subject, not a missing link. A person with a family, a culture, a rich internal life, and a desperate need for continued obscurity. If I'd reported Kin's existence, what would have followed? Best case, protective custody, perpetual study, life in a reservation or research facility. Worst case, exploitation, experimentation, loss of autonomy, and the eventual extinction of Kin's people, as they were absorbed into human systems they neither understood nor consented to. I chose to let them remain hidden. I chose their freedom over our knowledge. History may judge that choice harshly, but I must believe, that some discoveries are too dangerous to make, and some truths are best left in the shadows where they've survived for 500,000 years. If you're reading this, it means something has happened to me, or I've decided that the time for secrecy has passed. Use this information wisely. Remember that Kin's people are not relics or curiosities. They're refugees from a world we've largely destroyed, clinging to survival in the few places we haven't yet colonized completely. If we have any wisdom, any compassion, we'll let them be. She saved the document, encrypted it with a password known only to Sarah Okonkwo, and sent it to 3 separate secure servers. Then she erased the trail of the upload and turned off her computer. Officer Kowalski called at 9 a.m. "Dr. Reeves, I need you to come down to the station. We have questions about your patient from last week." "I'm afraid that patient's records are sealed due to medical privacy concerns," Maya said calmly. "The individual was discharged with my supervision and is no longer in Seattle. We have reports of unusual activity at Harborview, equipment malfunctions, missing supplies. Equipment malfunctions occur regularly at any hospital. As for supplies, I used personal vacation days for a hiking trip. I'm entitled to purchase camping equipment. A man named Edmund Ross has been making inquiries. He claims his organization has evidence of an unknown species in the Pacific Northwest and believes you're involved in concealing it." Maya's heart hammered, but her voice remained steady. "Mr. Ross is entitled to his theories. If he has evidence of cryptozoological significance, he should present it to proper scientific channels. I'm a trauma surgeon officer, not a zoologist. My concern is with human patients." "Was your patient human, Dr. Reeves?" The question hung in the air. Maya thought about the stone in her drawer, the secret it represented, and the choice she'd made. "My patient," she said slowly, "was a person in need of medical care. I provided that care. That's the extent of my involvement." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Kowalski said, "You're sure about this? Once I close my report, it's done. But if you're withholding information—" "I'm sure," Maya said. "There's nothing more I can tell you." "All right then. Take care of yourself, Dr. Reeves." The call ended. Maya sat in her kitchen, coffee cooling in front of her, and felt the weight of her decision settle permanently across her shoulders. Epilogue. 6 months later, Maya stood at the boulder on the ridge, checking the spot where Kin had left the first marker stone. It was her 3rd visit to the site, timed to coincide with her quarterly camping trips, a new habit she'd developed as part of maintaining her cover story. This time, there was something new. Beside the original stone sat 3 others, arranged in a careful pattern. The first showed a small handprint, a child's hand, surely, next to Kin's larger one. The second depicted what looked like a celebration, multiple figures gathered around a central symbol. The third showed the profile of a face remarkably like Maya's own, crude but recognizable, with marks that might have been symbols of respect or honor. Messages. Kin was communicating across the void that separated their peoples, using the only method available that didn't require technology or writing. Maya added her own stone to the arrangement, one she'd prepared carefully over the past weeks. On it, she'd etched a simple image, 2 hands, different sizes, reaching toward each other but not quite touching. And below it, a single word in careful block letters, "Friend." She sat by the stones for an hour, looking out over the forest, knowing that somewhere in those miles of wilderness, Kin was going about the daily business of survival, caring for that child, teaching the next generation, keeping alive a culture that predated agriculture, writing, and cities. a people who'd chosen to remain in the margins, to give up technological advancement in exchange for autonomy and freedom. Maya wondered what future awaited them. Climate change was altering the Pacific Northwest ecosystem. Human development continued to push into formerly remote areas. How much longer could Kin's people remain hidden? A decade? A century? Eventually, the gaps in satellite coverage would close. The forest refugees would shrink. The moment of contact would become inevitable. But maybe by then, humanity would have matured enough to handle such a meeting with wisdom and compassion. Maybe the children of Kin's generation and the children of Maya's generation would find a better way to coexist than their ancestors had managed. Or maybe not. History suggested that encounters between human and other rarely ended well for the other. Either way, Maya had made her choice. She would carry the secret of Kin's existence until the day she died, a weight balanced by the knowledge that somewhere in these mountains, a person lived freely because of her silence. As she hiked back to her car, Maya thought about all the patients she'd treated over the years, all the lives she'd saved or failed to save. Kin would be just another case in her long career, except that Kin represented something more. A reminder that there were forms of healing that went beyond surgery and medicine. Sometimes the greatest service a doctor could provide was knowing when to step back, when to choose privacy over publicity, when to honor a patient's need to remain unseen. In her apartment that night, Maya took out the small stone Kin had given her and held it to the light, tracing the carved lines with her finger. The handprint, 5 fingers, like her own, yet so different, a symbol of kinship that transcended species. She thought about the choice she'd made, the secret she'd keep, and she thought about the question that would haunt her the rest of her life. Had she done the right thing? There was no way to know. The ethical calculus of her decision was too complex, involving considerations that philosophy hadn't yet developed frameworks to analyze. She'd weighed individual autonomy against collective knowledge, immediate safety against long-term survival, and come down on the side of silence. Some nights she questioned that choice. Most nights she made peace with it. Because she'd looked into those ancient eyes and recognized something fundamental, the right to exist on one's own terms without being observed, catalogued, and controlled. The right to remain in the shadows, if that's where safety lay. Humanity had claimed dominion over the visible world. Perhaps the kindest thing Maya could do was leave the invisible world alone, to let those who'd found refuge in remoteness maintain it for as long as they could. She placed the stone back in its drawer, turned off the lights, and went to bed. Tomorrow she'd return to the hospital, to the daily rhythm of trauma cases and surgical schedules. Life would continue, ordinary and mundane on the surface. But beneath that surface, Maya carried the weight of the most extraordinary secret in human history. And in the mountains to the north, Kin carried the weight of survival for a people who'd chosen invisibility over recognition, obscurity over fame, and the ancient ways over the modern world. 2 individuals, separated by evolutionary gulfs and cultural chasms, connected by a single thread of understanding. That some truths were worth protecting, some silences were worth keeping, and some friendships transcended every boundary that biology or history could create. The stone in Maya's drawer carried 5 fingerprints, pressed into its surface when the stone was soft clay, then baked hard in a fire. Kin's statement of identity and existence, preserved in the only permanent medium available to a pre-ceramic culture. I was here. I'm real. I'm remembered. And in a hospital apartment in Seattle, a surgeon who'd taken an oath to preserve life kept that promise in the most profound way possible, by honoring the right of a people to remain unfound. Some discoveries, Maya had learned, were too dangerous to make. Some species were too precious to expose, and some meetings between human and other ended not with conquest or integration, but with mutual respect and the conscious choice to let mysteries remain mysterious. It was a small rebellion against the human drive to know, name, and control everything. But it was a rebellion Maya would maintain until her last breath. In the drawer, the stone waited. In the mountains, kinspeople endured. And between them, a thread of connection, fragile, secret, and utterly sacred, persisted against all odds. The forests still hold mysteries that challenge everything we thought we knew about our place on Earth. If this story stirred something in you, a sense of wonder, ethical questioning, or connection to the wilderness, subscribe to this channel and dive deeper with us into speculative tales rooted in rigorous science and profound humanity. Leave a comment below. If you had to make Maya's choice, what would you do? Would you protect the secret or bring it to light? Let's discuss the ethics of discovery, the price of knowledge, and what we owe to those who share our world but choose to remain hidden. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that asks what if, and explores the answers with both heart and intellectual honesty. Together, we'll keep pondering the invisible boundaries between known and unknown, human and other, silence and revelation.